Hi, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another virtual career spotlight. Before we get started, we do want to acknowledge that we're coming from the traditional territories of the Inklikapim and Silk people, and we want to acknowledge our Métis people and their contribution here in the Nicola Valley.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce to you our guest tonight, who is Lennard Joe, who is an RPF, or otherwise known as a registered professional forester. He is born and raised in the Nicola Valley, member of the Inklikapim, I can never say it properly, nation, and he also went to Nicola Canford Elementary and Merritt Secondary, and then started out his education, post-secondary education with NVIT, and then carried on with a few other institutions, which he'll get into a little bit later. Welcome, Lennard.
Hello.
So to start off, can you tell us a little bit about what your current occupation is, and I guess a little bit about your business, which I didn't mention?
Sure. So I am a registered professional forester, and currently I manage as a sole proprietor of my own company called Grizzly Consulting. And really, what's exciting about that is I do a lot of forestry, but what I do is not your standard everyday forestry anymore. And it's something that is growing and that we're seeing. So some of the things that I'm doing right now is I work with the province on modernizing forest policy, and whenever we see things going on out in the bush and everything else, there's legislation and regulations and we create policy and rules on how that is conducted. And so right now I'm working with the province on developing what the future of forestry would look like. And so there is some changes to it and everything else that's happening out there. I also work on other things such as I work with with a certification body called Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and part of that is in order to market and sell your wood, it's best to be under a certification model so that you get the stamp of approval that you're meeting all the criteria, social responsibilities, environmental responsibilities, and all these other high levels of things that kind of go along with your product. So I work with a company out of Washington, D.C. called Sustainable Forestry Initiative. And really with them, not only working with certification, but what's happening now, and we're starting to see it a lot in the province of BC, we're starting to see a lot in Canada, North America, and even globally, is just that uplift and recognition through reconciliations, UN DRIP, and everything else on developing or recognizing the rights and title of First Nations and Indigenous communities. So a lot of what I do is working in that realm as well. So there's a lot that I do. But the other side of things, working right now on forestry, on that side is finding ways on fiber utilization, looking at methods that'll incorporate climate change, drought, working on things that will develop higher levels of environmental protection, riparian, and wildlife, and even things such as road density and other things. So there's the spectrum is so much in the field of forestry. Yeah. And I think that's what it is. It's not just forestry, it's the forest now, and there's so much to do.
Yes. It's more like land stewardship, really, is what you're getting into. Yes. And it's very diverse and fascinating area. So can you give us an idea of some of the duties and responsibilities associated with your job?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Most of what I'm doing now is at that higher level of making sure there's an inclusive process. Again, looking at all the values that we have, and really a lot of what my job is just to make sure that there are ways of ensuring that process is conducted, but also there are ways that it can be measured and reported. So when someone goes and logs a block of to deliver logs to the mill, there's so many steps and things that need to happen. And so everyone follows the same rules, but they look so different when it's out there. And that, again, as a professional forester, you have that responsibility to develop that prescription and ways to do it. But also, at a higher level, you need to have the rules in place to make sure that a forester can still make the decisions, but maybe the blocks get smaller. Maybe there's got to be a zero net growth of rows. Like there's so much rows out there right now, and so they're saying, okay, you can do this, but you have to do this as well. And so the landscape is always changing, and it's pretty exciting out there to start looking at these things. So again, another thing that my job is to look at everything, look at the big picture of things. So you look at the impact of one action. So maybe it's cut block sizes, or maybe it's developing roads, or maybe it's even how far away you can go to the stream. But one of the things that we're looking at is cumulative effects. One is man-made effects, such as how many roads are you putting out there, and do they actually impact surface flow, right? And we're dealing with then you get mountain pine beetle, which we had in the past, or then you get large forest fires, and then you're looking at that, and it's called cumulative effects. Now we're looking at is climate change real? I think it is. We're starting to see these things, right? So now you're starting to look at, are we doing the right things, and are we taking into account everything that impacts, so that's the cumulative effect. So yeah, so that's kind of my job.
Sounds great.
Yeah, really super exciting. So what can you tell us a bit about what your work environment looks like? Are you working alone? We know that you own your own business, but are you also working as part of the team? Are you in an office, outside, traveling? It sounds like probably.
Yeah,
you could just dig into that, kind of what that environment is.
Having your own company, as a sole proprietor, I work alone, and then you just hire everything. I have an accountant, I have bookkeepers, I have everything else is arm's length away, and allows me to do my business. What I love about and I think it's happening more and more, is you're just starting to get certain individuals with different companies joining to develop a product. So a lot of my job is like this morning I was on the phone with Washington DC, and then we had a Canada meeting, and so we had people from Ottawa all the way to Vancouver, and so you try to have your Eastern meetings at 6 a.m. So the days are long in some instances. You'll have a 6 a.m. meeting because it's 9 o'clock in Ottawa or Washington, D.C. So you end up having a little bit of an early day. But with the internet, you can reach anywhere, really, right? And so a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of Teams meetings, lots of go-to meetings. We have to know every kind of whatever social media and also ways to have these meetings, virtual meetings, and you just understand that. And so that's what my office is. Merritt is such a great location, though, is that I can jump in my vehicle when the Coquihalla is not washed away and everything else, and get to Vancouver, have a day down there, and still drive home. And and that's kind of what a lot of my job is too, is going to different communities and meeting with different people and moving everyone's agenda forward. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And we got a bit of a sense there of kind of what a day looks like for you. Could you take us through maybe like a work week? What are some different things you might be working on? How does your day or week break down?
Well, it's really cool. So one of the things is that I'm a professional forester, and I happen to be a First Nations forester. And it was for a long time, I used to say I'm a First Nations forester, and and really look at it at that specialty. And then I kind of switched my focus or perspective on it, and I said, well, I'm still a forester, and I'm still this. And so I ended up saying that I'm a professional forester that has to be First Nations. And so I started, and that's why I call my company Grizzly Path, is creating the path, and whether it's myself on the path and trying to bring others on it, or I'm connecting industry with First Nations and Indigenous programs. But that's sort of what my job is right now. I sit as someone with almost 30 years experience now. It's unbelievable to look back and say, but what I noticed was from when I started to where I am today, I was always the first, always one of the first. And so I think I was the 8th. They say it, but we never really took records of it. But I think I'm the 8th First Nation that became a professional forester. So and I graduated, and I was at the University of British Columbia, and so the BC Association of Professional Foresters. And so as we're going along, people are always like, "Well, I share a lot, and I will always create and build." And so I always people are also, well, aren't you worried that someone's just going to take your job? I was like, well, there's too few of us, and one of the reasons why I consult and do the work I do is lots of times my job isn't invented yet. And so that's how I kind of went along and created. So zoom ahead a few 25 years or even 20 years, and you get to this point of where I look and say, if there's an idea, most of the time it's someone else has this idea as well. And so I work on creating ways to move that agenda forward. And really, you build a world where you can, I do anyways, of trust, really trust and relationships and like-mindedness to move some of these things forward. So a normal week for me will be like, I'll wake up right now. I've actually got a small contract, or it started as a small contract, but it's a very important contract with Intle Health. And so I work with 12 Intle bands on their emergency operations manager. And it was really in the fall when I first started my company again after a few years, was to recover from the wildfires. And a month later, the atmospheric river event hit, right? And so part of my normal week is working with the Intle Nation, working with the emergency management BC and everything else on moving that agenda forward. One was first dealing with the emergency, and now it's into recovery. So again, lots of Zoom meetings, lots of and most of my job is actually filling. I call it filling buckets. So every time, every program, every client, they want some certainty and they want some security, and so they're looking for funds, they're looking for building capacity, they're looking for some longevity of their programs, and they want it to be effective as well as efficient. And then they have to build. It's got to be trustworthy, and so it's got to be transparent. So then you work on the trust and the communications, and so that's almost what I bring into every job that I do. So I'll do that with emergency management. I do that with different companies that I'm working with right now. They're trying. There's so much change in the forestry environment right now. Everyone's trying to move their goalposts and to fit the current environment. They want Indigenous involvement, and lots of First Nations now are getting forest tenures. They're getting more volume, or they have volume, and volume has been reduced. So again, First Nations want to move their wood fiber, and they want to keep the local economy going. They want to create jobs. They want to do great things out in the forest and have environmental protection, but also look after cultural and traditional foods and other things. So that whole balance of things, but it all comes down again to they want some certainty that that these values will be looked after, but they also want security that they have something that they can create jobs, but also have an economic return. Everything's that balance. So a lot of my jobs throughout the week is always doing that. It's the same thing with whether it's with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative on their forest certification and growing. And so they've actually now just started an Indigenous section within their program. When we joined them in 2010, it was an idea, and then we started creating working groups, and now we actually have a whole section within the Sustainable Forestry Initiative at a North American level. So just being involved in creating an awareness of things creates, when great minds are in a room, someone's creating something, right? And so and that's what I see. The other job that I'm doing, and then I do other things. So I'm working with like Invasive Species Council of BC and working on something that I'm a forester, but I'm actually working on the aquatic invasive species program that they have there. And it caught my interest and fit within my my schedule, and so yeah, I'm looking at smallmouth bass up in Williams Lake that aren't supposed to be there. We're working with the Okanagan Nation Alliance on Great North or the Northern Pike that's coming in the Columbia River system. We're working with the Upper Nickel Band on yellow perch in Douglas Lake, and the Hausa Band with European green crab on the west coast. So just these other things that allows me to get out and explore and really create a lot of opportunities. So I don't know if you're going to ask a question, but this is going to lead into something. So a lot of what I do, people will say, well, I'll say this to people is education is very important. Education teaches you in a way how to think. Education teaches you in many ways you can get a process from A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think the one thing about getting education is that it actually, you grow. You can go through grade 1 to 12 and you get an education. If you actually learn something on that, though, is actually, one thing is it seems like repetition, but it's actually just like exercising. You're growing. And so, but in order to do that, you create habits. So a lot of what I do, and why after a few decades, everything seems like it's working out really well, it's because of the things that I did when I was a kid. So my parents, I don't know if they ever thought I was going to go to university. No one ever did in my family. It wasn't, we were dealing with the residential, we were dealing with a whole bunch of things. So the idea that you're going to go to college or university we never really sat around the table and talked about it. For me, it was actually a university in the United States said, we're going to give you a scholarship and you're going to come and play hockey for us. What's your major? What do you want to major in? And I looked at them like they could just see that blank look. Major? What do you mean? And I said, I'll take whatever you want me to take. It doesn't work like that. And they said, but most of the guys on our team were taking PE or they're going to become physical education teachers or whatever, right? And I was like, so it wasn't that important. So I thought about that and I said, what I did learn growing up, though, was how to grow up. As I learned how to work at something, I learned how to be accountable for something. I learned how to be responsible for something, whether it was getting up early in the morning and doing my chores and doing these other things. I grew up on a ranch. So these are the things that I looked at. And then the other part was just ethics. What are your ethics? And how do you, so all these things that are more EQ instead of IQ are just as important or more. I think on what you're going to do to be a success in your life.
What I was observing as you were speaking, and what I was thinking about is, surely you went to school to become, a land steward, learn how to manage our resources properly. But really, a lot of what you're doing in your day-to-day job is actually relationship building. And you're doing it on a lot of different levels. And those are the kind of skills, like you said, that you actually you gain those through your school experiences. You learn how to get along in the sandbox, so to speak, and how to work with others and listen to their perspectives, and how they can learn from yours. So yeah, really enjoyed that explanation.
Yeah. When I was going to school, like I had. I'll say it. I was not an A student. I was not. It didn't seem that important to me in many aspects. I tried really hard. I didn't realize that I was dyslexic until grade 6. And there was a teacher named Lloyd Charney. He said, "Man, Len, you apply yourself, but you're not getting it." Right? And so he bought me a dictionary, a Webster's dictionary. And he says, "Here you go." And I kept that dictionary right through university. Actually, that was that one symbol of and I seen him in like 10 years ago or something like that, and I actually thanked him, and he didn't remember.
Yeah, it's amazing what an impact teachers can have on your life without you.
That's
exactly
really it.
realizing.
And so going through schools, I think I might have had a C average. It was that one where, what do you need to pass? What do you need to pass? And then when I had a university talk to me and say, well, here's what you need to come play hockey, that was my new incentive. Okay, I need these grades to go play hockey. And so that was one of the things. But one of the other ones, and this is the one thing I think I would say to students, is look at what kind of student you are, what kind of person are you. I actually, when I went to I had to go to college and transfer to a university because I didn't take a second language for a course. And we were, I think immersed into French at grade 5 or 6. I don't think it was grade 4 in elementary school. And I loved it. So I took 2-3 years of French, went to the high school, and then that's when they started saying, oh, you need French as or you need a second language if you're going to go to university. And so one, I didn't think I was going to go to university, and number two, I was like, but I already have a second language, we have in Legam. And this is the one thing also that I remember was they said, you need a recognized language. You can't, that doesn't count. You can learn German, Mandarin, you can learn and French, and it baffled me. And so again, my father was chief all through my childhood and well into just a couple of years ago. And so I brought it up to him and I said, wow, I don't get it. And so after a discussion, we decided that I was going to protest. And so I went to the school, and Miss Bonet, thank you for understanding. She was a French teacher. And I said, yeah, I'm protesting. I'm not taking any tests. I'll be here every class. And, I'll sit in the back quietly and not disrupt. And that was really hard for me to do, not disrupt. But, and so I got an F in French. But what this did was it because my father had a leadership role, this created a stir within the leadership. And so I like to think that maybe it was part of how we get in Legam and Sealton school systems today.
Yeah, it may just well be. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Can I circle back?
Yeah.
I just want to find out a little bit about what you like the most about the kind of work you do, and what maybe you find the most challenging or difficult part.
Gosh, I think one of the things that I love about the work that I do is it's in the environment, right? And so I actually wanted to be a wildlife biologist or I was going to go into conservation, and I was actually doing biodiversity studies and other things as my summer job when I was at UBC. And then I realized that forestry had the biggest impact. So I think what I love is to be able to do something that actually balances that impact, or has ways of bringing value into that, or incorporating new things. So one of the things I love about my job is I actually create these environments where I can actually push some ideas, plant seeds, ideas, and over time start seeing them grow. So I really like that. The other part of my job that I really like, not so much now as when I first started, was that you can go anywhere, right? You can. So I've been all through the U.S. My job took me to look at markets in Asia, right? And so these things that you don't really know that are out there until they are. And so that's what I really like about my job. What do I not like about my job is sometimes the higher you get, sometimes you think it's the greatest idea and it doesn't get traction, or or funding ends, or there's a whole bunch of things there that you're not always going to get what you want when you're doing it. There's a lot of risk that is out there, and yeah, there's some of these things have so many things in play that you don't always get what you want when you're doing the work. And so I think that's one of it. I used to hate speaking in front of people and things like that. And so as you grow, get more experience, your fears change for sure.
Yeah, you're pretty used to it now, right? What are some of the most memorable experiences of your career that you can tell us about?
Oh gosh. I think one was what I really love was I became I wasn't a board of director yet for Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and we were going down and meeting in Washington D.C. And if you get to see a city in the U.S., I would recommend just go to Washington at least once, and you can see where they it is globally a very powerful country. And so when you're there, but you also see the poverty side of things, you also see the human side of things, and everything. But one of the things when I was in Washington was it seemed like a place where things got done, and everyone's in suit and ties, and I just, when I got there, I really felt out of place. But I went into a meeting, and we were developing standards for the 2015 to 2019 SFI standards. I went into this meeting, and I looked at it, and they didn't have any objectives that were specifically for First Nations and First Nations values. And going through, and I sat quietly through the meeting, and well, actually I was engaged in many things in the meeting, but then I finally asked them the question. I said, well, where's, First Nations values and everything are always secondary. It's under biodiversity, or it's under water, or something. I said, well, why can't First Nations have their own objective? What's wrong with that, right? And it was funny because it was a U.S. program, and they said, well, because everyone's a private landowner here in the U.S., and I don't know if they will go for that. Well, I ended up meeting one of the guys in our working group, and the board was one of the largest private landowners in the U.S. He asked me out for dinner that night, and so we talked, and I shared my views, and I gave ideas of how we could do this and get support in the U.S. The next morning, we're in a law firm about 2.5 blocks from the White House, and he comes in, and there's 25 people in the room at this big table, and he goes, I talked to some colleagues last night, and we're supporting this objective.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I'm sitting there and
That's
looking,
amazing.
saying, this is, and so that's when I realized that everyone, you got to recognize your value and have trust in your values to bring them forward, and then hopefully someone with a little more weight and ideas that you can can help move things. And so now today, I really like I said earlier, is now they've got their whole section on Indigenous relations and values and equality. So
Wow, that's really great.
Yeah, I'm curious to know who the landowner was.
yeah, well, it was funny. It was a company called Plum Creek, and they actually worked with Weyerhaeuser, and now they're the largest in the
So I was hoping we could pick back up. Len, you mentioned your pathway kind of through high school, talking about not taking that second language and your reasons for that. Did you, upon leaving high school, did you know right away you wanted to be a professional forester? And then can you take us through a bit of your journey from NBIT to Selkirk to UBC and what that looked like?
Yes. I left. I was in Merritt. I played with the Warriors. That was the Centennials before the Centennials, and then the Warriors. Then we went back to the Cents. So I played with the Warriors, and then I played a half season with the Centennials after that. And I was going to NBIT. And for me, there would just seem to be so much pressures on things. There seemed to be a lot of, in Merritt, I don't know how it is now, but there was a lot of underage drinking. You could just go and basically grab beer or whatever you wanted, and I really, and I didn't notice that. It was just normal. But then I noticed that it was impacting my life. And so one of the things was, I said, well, I'm going to leave Merritt. So I even thought Kamloops was far, right? So I ended up going to Kamloops, and I was playing. Caribou College had a hockey team, so I played with them. And while I was there, I noticed there was, again, just this influence on me not being able to make really good decisions, and not being strong enough to say no, right? And so I actually was. Maybe I wasn't strong enough, but I was smart enough to say, I got to get out of here. I got to create something for myself. And I was walking down, I saw a brochure that said Selkirk College, and had a guy doing a ski tour across a mountainside. And I said, oh, that's a course. And so I actually got my first certificate in wildland recreation from Selkirk College. But it was the first place where, again, with my colleagues there, that I learned how to study. I went from a C to a B to B pluses, and maybe with a couple of A's, and really learning that if you apply yourself in the right environment, you can succeed. And so once I finished there, I went and I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I worked on a fisheries job here in Merritt on the CP rail recovery, and they were doing these side channel assessments. And I actually worked with some biologists, and I said, well, the biologist asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, man, I really like your job. He said, well, you got to go back to school if you want my job. And I said, And then I think, what was I, 21 or something like that? And you feel so old. I was like, well, how come I'm so old? I can't go back to school now. I got to go start working. But then I saw what he was doing, and what I saw one day was how he talked to the leadership and how he made recommendations, and they said yes. And I thought, oh, this is how you influence. If you have an idea, you got to have something in your, on the wall that says, listen, I've got a great idea. And so that was one of the things that captured me, was that's what, so actually I applied to the University of British Columbia. I didn't think I was going to get in because of the grades and everything else being needed. So I actually went to Australia and Singapore and Malaysia, and I was gone for about 8 months. And while I was there on my walkabout, I got, I phoned home, and my dad said, hey, there's a letter here from UBC, and you're accepted. So I said, oh, I guess I got to go home. I think I'm going to university. So yeah, even when I went there, I thought I was going to get into conservation and that sort of things. I was doing small mammal population assessments, analysis, and I was doing all these things of that I thought I was going to go into that. But then one of my summer jobs was biodiversity research with CAN4 up in Fort St. John, and that's when I saw the impact of forestry on wildlife, on conservation, on indigenous values, on everything on the land. And I thought, well, I got to be part of this, and that's how I made that change. Yeah, that's the loop I made. And so then when I went to UBC, I was away from it for a bit, and I actually graduated 4.0. I graduated with honors from UBC, and that blew me away.
Yeah, and such an interesting path too. I like the idea of being in Australia and then all of a sudden hitching a flight back to get back to school. That must have been a hard decision.
That was a really hard decision. I could have been still in Australia right now.
So I know, Len, we're catching you like at a time in your career when you've done lots and you've seen lots and you're very accomplished. If you think back to early in your career as a forester, what kind of directions could it have gone for you if it wasn't into your own business and consulting? What other kind of avenues are there for professional foresters?
You know, the one thing that I was glad that I did was, again, to get exposure and experience. I think working with the province, Ministry of Forest was one. Like, I think there's so much there when you get into a government position. They've got the structure, they've got the process, they've got so many things that are there to help you develop. Then you got, again, for us was industry and working for a major licensee. Again, they're very big. When I first started, it was as soon as I went there, I recognized that there wasn't much in the way of engagement and values and the balance with First Nations. But that's definitely changed over the years to the point right now where it's they know. That's why I'm saying I'm in a world now where they're moving the goalposts to make things work. And so when I was one of the things that I've seen is really getting out there, and so to the students I say is keep trying new things. Look at, if there's an opportunity that comes in front of you, you take that opportunity and learn what you can, because every experience that you have is building you as on your success. And so I would say that every even if you got a job at McDonald's right now, even if so my first jobs was working at Petrocan here on in Hill and Merritt, and I worked at Petrocan, and there was things that I learned that I and so I look at these things and say, no matter what you do, that's you're building who you're going to be. And so if you're going to be, I would tell everyone to get a job where you labor, get a job that you're so happy at the end of the day to go home because your hands are sore, your back's sore, because that could be your career if you give you some incentive to look at where everything is, because in this world you're going to make whoever you're going to be. You're going to make decisions, and with every decision will be a consequence. And the bad decisions, the consequence, that's called experience. the good decisions, again, that's experience as well. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that was great advice, I think. And I don't really know if there are bad decisions. I mean, maybe they are in hindsight, but you learn from those decisions, and you can always move on to do something else. You learn about if it's a bad decision, you learn about what you don't like, and you're going to look for something else. So, but great great analogy there. I'm wondering, can you tell us a bit about what you think the future looks like for forestry and maybe the natural resource industry as a whole? And do you think there'll be a high demand for people with your education skills and experience?
I think so. And I think it's happening with anything. So again, it's now into stewardship and it is into more environment. Even forestry is not just forestry anymore. And so there's this real balance of integrating multi-disciplines into an organization. So whether you're going into something and looking at biodiversity, whether you're going to something to look at water, whether you're going to something to look after the amphibians or wildlife, there's whenever there's something that's threatened, I would say, global, climate change. There's so much global change going on. Things it gets resourced, right? And so I would look right now and say, yeah, it is going to change. Wood is a renewable resource. It's up there. There'll always be trees growing. It'll just be what's it going to look like? How are we going to apply what we know and put that onto the ground, right? So I think there's a ton of different opportunities, and I think it'll fit within many different I guess things that we do know. So there'll be logging companies, and even right now, traditional logging companies, where they used to just look at a prescription and log, are also hiring people that have some experience on things, because they're looking at saying, well, what does this retention look like, or how are we going to reduce compaction of soils, and how are we going to cut it in a way that creates the outcome that we want. So there's so many different things that are out there for.
Yeah, just to build on that, Len, do you think that technological advances or societal changes will impact your line of work?
Well, the one thing is technology. Foresters on average are 12.5 to 17 pounds heavier than they used to be. I don't know if that's the real number. They write that down. They have drones. They have all these other equipment that are out there that we used to have to just walk and do these things. And there's so many things now that you go to the bush actually less now, because they have LiDAR, right? They have, there's so many things that you can do on your computer to gather the information that you need, and then you go out in the field and verify. So there's so many different changes of how we used to approach a job. Now they're using drones. Like drones are, so if you can handle a drone, you're valuable now. And so everyone's getting their drone licenses and learning how to incorporate special software for drones. They're doing it for roads, rehabilitation, planting, everything, right? And so I think there's a lot of really cool technologies that are out there that are making the job pretty fun, I think. Yeah.
And pretty technological. And I mean, with the impact of climate change, it seems like there would be more and more demand for having more accurate information that way.
Yeah, one of the cool things that's happening right now is like they call it green up. So after you log a block and you plant it, you want the trees to get to a certain height, and once they're a certain height, they say it's greened up and you can log adjacent to it. If there's some science that went and said the tree's got to be this tall, and then it's safe to log next to it. And now the science is getting more, there's more science that's coming into it. And now they're looking at hydrological greening. So now it's not just the height of it, it's not just the slope, but there's a whole bunch of ways to measure water flow, water capacity, and so quantity and quality. And now they're starting to bring these things and saying, well, if we're going to be responsible stewards, here's what we need. Here's what we need, right? And so it's really cool. And so I think there'll always be ways that we're looking on how to manage the land, and there'll be and new ways to apply that knowledge.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. Can you tell me what personal attributes, skills, and interests might be a good fit for someone planning a career in forestry?
I think for me, one, I think you do have to have a balance of loving nature, but being able to spend days away from it too. Because now there's such a balance of that. You can literally, I think you can do forestry anywhere, right? Rural BC is definitely a place. I think one of the things, if you're looking at starting, your life journey, it's rural BC where you're going to find affordable housing. If you actually want a house and start doing stuff like that. But I think that one of the things is to be able to. There's got to be some. It's got to be with any job, but you got to have discipline. You got, forestry is in the field of the technical side of things. Anyways, it's not that bad. Some days are 6 o'clock in the morning, but some days there's a lot of travel. But there's a balance of that, right? And so I think the one thing with me in forestry is you don't have to be as physically fit as you used to be, but you have to love nature. You have to handle a little bit of the mosquitoes. You have to handle a little bit of the flies. You have to have a common sense to be able to be out there working alone or with a couple of 3 people or whatever. So you have to be very independent and prepared to do a day's work. But it's very rewarding.
Is there anything that a high school student could or should be doing right now to help them learn a little bit more, prepare for a career in forestry?
You know what I think right now is you can Google anything. If you hear things, or there's you watch the news and there's other things on forestry, is I would just say just read. Do some Google searches, things that interest you, whether it's and even if you just type in forestry on Google, you'll start hitting so many things, and you'll realize how big an environment it is and how many opportunities there are out there. And I think just doing your research and looking into things. I think again, it's still one of the things where learning how to type, learning how to type and do reports, learning Excel and Word and other things like that are really good. I would say also just doing certain things like get a handheld GPS, go on and do Google Earth and just learn how to read a map and other things. Just things that that'll help you. I think that these are things. Get a driver's license. Probably every job we need is you need a driver's license, right? And so get a driver's license, and once you get that driver's license, don't get too much points, because you want to keep it. It gets expensive. And so I think that's one of the things that I would definitely say if you're going into forestry is it's there's a lot of bushwork and everything, but again, it balances with using the technologies that are here.
I can't wait to tell the science classes to work extra hard in their lab reports after hearing that. So it's always nice to give it purpose, right? Like, you're doing this because, and Lennard, you've actually left us with a ton of really great advice. But I was hoping, just as the final question, if you had one kind of last thing to say to students that are going to be watching this, what would you tell them for just some general career advice?
I think a career advice is, when I look at life, we're a vessel. As soon as you're born and you're a baby, you're a vessel, And so you're going on this journey through life, and you're getting all these experiences, and you're making mistakes, you're learning from them. But if you're going to take this ship far, and you're going to see some amazing things, you've got to look after that vessel. You've got to, physically, you've got to be, strong, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I think you have to have all that balance in order to really get the most out of bringing this vessel through this thing called life. And so one of the things that I would say to any student or anybody growing up is to have that awareness of yourself. Realize that every time you do something, there's a consequence to it, whether it's good or bad. But keep track of how things are. Learn what you like, learn what you don't like, and know that you have the choice. One of the big pieces of advice is your parents are they, of course they have expectations and dreams and that for you, but don't do things for your parents. Do things for yourself. Because what'll happen, and this happened to me, this is my last little story, was I told my dad, I'm really close to my dad, and I was really close to my mom as well, but I was talking to my dad, and I said, well, I did this because this is what you wanted me to do. And, I went to school, and this is what I did. And my dad looked at me, and he said, well, when did I say that? And I looked at him, and I thought, well, you didn't, but that's what you expected, right? And my dad says, no, I supported that, but it wasn't what I expected. And so these are the things of, again, because you may be doing something to disappoint yourself, right? So look at things of what you want to do in your life, but also just remember what your goals are and work on that. And I think the last one is you never, people just want to finish high school. Then they want to either go to college or university, or get a job. And that's the goal. I would say make the goal in your life to learn. Always, you're always going to be learning. And at school, it seems, in high school, it seems like it's pushed on you to learn. But once that's over, you're going to look back and say, that was one of the best years of my life, and like for me, high school was the best 9 years of my life. But it's the experience of things. So that's my main thing is the one thing is work on your own. Be responsible on these things. Be accountable, because it's only to yourself.
Awesome. And yeah, great piece of advice there, and all the way too. So much appreciated. I just want to open it up here before we say goodnight to our guests, if they have any questions. And again, guests, we can add it to the chat feature, or you're welcome to unmute or turn your video on and ask that question as well, if you have one. So I'll give everyone just a sec to think about that. And while everyone thinks, I'll tell them a quick story about Lennard and I. We did a Tough Mudder together many years ago. Now I looked at the shirt the other day, and I thought, oh, that was a long time ago, 2014. But Lennard had the privilege of carrying me up quite a hill as one of the challenges. So I'll never forget that.
Not by choice, I'll say that. Dave was the biggest guy on our team, and you guys all know Dave. And when we got to the part where we had to do the carry, everyone loved Dave. Yes.
Yeah, it was definitely, I wasn't a popular one there, but I appreciate you partnering up with me. I just got a message here on the chat, and it was from Monica that said No questions, but just wanted to say thank you for all the information and what an excellent presentation. So, and I'd echo those as well. So Lennard, thank you so much for joining us and answering all our questions tonight, and again, providing so much great information.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And I loved all my years at Marist Secondary. I loved my 1 year when I went to NVIT, and it's really good to see how these things are still here and growing. So thank you guys for all the work that you do too.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to do this. We really appreciate it, and it was really inspiring to hear your stories.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.